clerk gathered up papers to be stored in the safe of a somewhat shabby office in Cleveland, Ohio. As he passed his employer's office, the clerk was startled to see the young businessman, usually a model of sobriety, leap into the air, click his heels together, and crow aloud, "I'm bound to be rich, bound to be rich, bound to be rich." The uncharacteristically joyous 26-year-old entrepreneur was not long out of the ranks of clerkship himself. He had no college or business school or technical education. He had no family wealth behind him. But he had an uncanny intuition for the right moment in business and for making the right decision. And he was right when he kicked up his heels and exclaimed about his future wealth. His name was John D. Rockefeller. There are certain attributes that are usually considered necessary for a successful executive: drive, ambition, intelligence, experience, and education will most often be mentioned by executive placement experts. But one quality that sets the extraordinary business executive apart from the ordinary is rarely mentioned. That quality is intuition. The great men of American business were rarely men with backgrounds of wealth and education. They were men who had natural attributes, men of drive and ambition to be sure, men of intelligence. Men like J.P. Morgan, Andrew Carnegie, Joseph Kennedy, Henry Ford, Rockefeller, all might be called men who had intuition and vision, men who could see the future. People who can see the future, people with intuition, with precognitive ability, people who possess extrasensory perception have always been singled out. In ancient times, they might have been oracles or soothsayers. Later, they were called magicians and wizards and sorcerers. They have been the inventors and the builders. At various times, they have been both rewarded and persecuted. The reward may have been a king's favor or a gold coin. Today, quite often, the reward is a stock option. In American business today, executives are decision makers. The function of decision-making is based on a combination of factors. An executive, for example, who is called on to decide whether a manufacturing plant should be moved from point A to point B or some other place, must first consider a number of questions. Will there be adequate labor supply at point B? How will the removal affect point A? Is there a tax advantage in the move? How about supplies and deliveries from the plant? Is it a good short-term move, or will it be more advantageous over the long run? For questions such as these, there is factual data that can give the executive a good overall picture. And all of the factors could be considered in just a few seconds by an electronic computer. But while a computer can make projections based on past data and probability, the executive has this kind of information and more. The executive has his own intuition about the future, as well as his considered judgment. Often, complete data is not available, and then intuition is far more valuable than all of the factual analysis possible. But even when information is at hand and relatively complete, the executive's intuition is still the best decision-making tool because it encompasses the future as well as the past. Each decision is basically a guess on the executive's part. The man who regularly guesses correctly is a successful executive. While the same sort of information is usually available to most executives, some people have an inordinately high percentage of good guesses. These people have more going for them than facts and sophisticated information-gathering procedures. These are generally men and women with a highly developed sense of ESP. The phenomenon has not gone unnoticed. From the time of Alexander the Great and before, great thinkers and leaders have been aware of extrasensory perception in themselves and in others of unusual ability. It has been noted by such diverse personalities as Madame Curie and General George S. Patton, Albert Einstein, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Guglielmo Marconi, and Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill's extrasensory perception is a well-documented fact by the great British Prime Minister himself and many of his biographers. Two famous wartime stories in particular show Sir Winston's extraordinary sense of precognition. They also illustrate that the great statesman was conscious of his ability and followed his hunches, not caring much how others might receive his reliance on the unknown. In the middle of a dinner with some members of his cabinet at number 10 Downing Street, Churchill suddenly rose from the dining room table and hurried across the house and down to the kitchen. He ordered the servants to bring the rest of the dinner to the dining room and to go immediately to the bomb shelter. Churchill then returned to the dining room and, without comment, sat back down to his dinner. A few minutes later, a German bomb hit one side of the Prime Minister's house, completely gutting the kitchen area. On another occasion, Churchill admitted to actually hearing a voice that told him what to do. Out visiting anti-aircraft batteries in the midst of the Blitz, Churchill suddenly varied his routine. While the near side door of his car was held open for him as usual, he suddenly veered and went around to the other side of the car, opened the door, and got in, remaining on the side opposite his usual seat. As the car moved away, a bomb exploded in the street, raising the vehicle onto two side wheels. Instead of turning over, the car righted itself and sped away. "It was my beef on that side of the car that pulled it down," Churchill wryly remarked. Later, he said that he had heard a voice telling him to get in the car on that side and stay there. "And that's what I did," Churchill said. Churchill's experiences are dramatic examples of precognition, foreseeing an event that will happen in the future. This is only one of the 4 categories of ESP that have an important place in creative decision-making. The other 3 are telepathy, clairvoyance, and psychokinesis. Telepathy is the experience of a thought or picture or piece of information passing from the mind of one person to the mind of another. Under controlled test conditions, one person concentrates on sending an image and the other on receiving. A highly sensitive receiver can often pick up mental images from a number of sources. Sometimes the receiver may be able to pick up a direct image from an inanimate object. This experience is called clairvoyance, receiving information directly from matter rather than through the mind of another. The 4th category of extrasensory perception is psychokinesis, often referred to as mind over matter. This experience involves controlling matter, its course or movement, even its structure, by using the power of the mind. There are a number of testing procedures that are used to determine the level of a subject's ESP. Some of these tests are not difficult to set up and perform. More sophisticated and difficult testing methods exist to measure ESP. Chief among the newly developed tests is a machine called the plethysmograph. The plethysmograph has been extensively used to determine ESP levels among business executives and others whose business is making decisions. This machine measures and records the variation of the finger's volume of blood. The relationship between blood in the finger and extrasensory perception has to do with emotional responses to various stimuli. Extraordinary brain activity, on the conscious or unconscious level, causes a signal to be sent to the rest of the body, calling for additional blood in the brain. The first areas affected are the extremities, fingers, toes, ears. The response is similar to other unconscious physiological reactions, particularly what scientists call the fight or flight responses. The emotion of fear may cause one to turn pale. What is happening in the body is that blood is flowing to the muscles in preparation for flight, and so is being drained out of the face and into the legs. The fight response, caused by anger, sends blood rushing to the extremities, such as the fists, in preparation for battle. The facial extremity responds as well, turning red with the rush of blood. The amount of blood in the finger changes with the slightest amount of mental stimulus. But there are measurable variations between different activities. By testing a subject under rigorously controlled conditions, the exact stimulus and the variation of its reaction can be measured and qualified. It has been found that an ESP-sensitive receiver reacts very rapidly to a sender's mental signals. Tests have shown that within 10 seconds from the time a sender begins to try to communicate with a receiver, the plethysmograph begins to record a loss of blood volume in the finger. The tests involving the plethysmograph that seek evidence of ESP in a subject involve a sender and the subject who is the receiver. A series of cards are used. These cards are inscribed with various names. 20 cards are used. 5 inscribed with names familiar to the subject. 5 with names that are known to the sender. 5 have names unfamiliar to both, chosen at random from a telephone directory. And 5 cards are blank. The cards are thoroughly mixed. The sender, out of the receiver's sight, looks at each card in turn and attempts to transmit what is on the card to the receiver. During the time of the experiment, the receiver is hooked up to the plethysmograph and the various reactions are measured and recorded. The tests shattered a hypothesis of the experimenters that the greatest response would occur in reaction to the names known by the sender, since he would have a stronger response to the names with which he was familiar, and the receiver would pick up this stronger signal. Actually, what happened was that the strongest response recorded on the plethysmograph occurred in reaction to names known by the receiver. What the tests clearly showed was that the receiver, rather than the sender, is the active participant, that ESP-sensitive individuals may reach out with their minds to the minds of others in search of information. This has certainly been true in the testing of various business executives, who seem to be particularly aggressive in their use of ESP. Some executives even report that if their intuition on a particular decision is very strong and in opposition to all of the facts that seem to be apparent, they will go along with intuition. In making decisions, the further you go in the business world, the more far-ranging the decisions become. While a decision at a lower management level or in an individual situation may have consequences that are important for you and for generally a limited time, decisions made in the top echelons of business are far-ranging, affect a great many people, and often have consequences that may only be truly realized years later. At the top in business, executives are hardly ever dealing with present situations. The decisions at the top deal with planning for next year or the year after, or 5 and even 10 years ahead. It is obvious, then, that a highly developed sense of ESP is an invaluable asset in the decision-making process and in getting ahead. The good guesser, the people who see the future and can risk making a decision when the end result is not clear, are the people who end up making those really important decisions. ESP exists in all of us. There is theory and strong scientific evidence to suggest that ESP was man's first form of communication and an important factor in his early survival in a dangerous world. In the process of developing verbal and written communication, man discarded and in many ways unlearned much of his capacity for extrasensory perception. But it is an innate sense that lies dormant in most of us. For those who depend on this sense, the decision-making executive, for example, ESP is much more wide awake than dormant. Often, people will, through neglect and timidity, inhibit their own sense of intuition, their own extrasensory perception, to the point that it does not operate at all. Experimentation with this kind of subject has shown that while the ESP may not be operating on a level of awareness, it is still there, hidden behind barricades of inhibition. This may account for the fact that most children demonstrate higher capabilities for ESP than adults. and they often lose much of this ability as they grow older. Researchers theorize that children are less inhibited than adults and more willing to accept the possibility of ESP. There is nothing psychological to interfere with their ability to perceive, and therefore they simply do it. Children who have demonstrated unusual talent for ESP and then lost it in adolescence have been trained to recapture their ability. People can be trained to improve their ESP and to use their powers of intuition. Usually, it is a process of getting around the defenses that the conscious mind has set up. Using the plethysmograph, experimenters have found that ESP-resistant subjects, while they have little conscious awareness of extrasensory perception, often do receive information of an extrasensory nature. This information is not converted into conscious thought, however, but is picked up by the nervous system and causes a physiological reaction. This reaction is easily picked up and recorded by the plethysmograph, but the content of the information received is ordinarily not brought into the subject's awareness. An example of acute extrasensory perception that seems to exist without development or nurturing was a man who was part of an experimental project involving the plethysmograph. He was a relatively successful executive with a large corporation who had arrived at his position even though he had dropped out of school in the 6th grade and had no other educational background. But it was well known in his company that he had a sort of sixth sense about being able to spot any impending problem on the job, whether it was with a man or a machine. He would always be right there before the trouble became obvious. It was as though he could literally see the problem before it had developed. He totally credited his unusual ESP for his success with the company and depended totally on his ability in decision-making. While he was not an exceptionally verbal sort of man, his intuitive powers were well documented by the plethysmograph. The use of powers of extrasensory perception is rarely based on knowing the way to use them. That is a secondary reaction. Primarily, you must unblock the channels of communication between you and your intuitive power. Research leads us to believe that ESP operates constantly, whether we want it to or not, well beneath the normal cognitive processes. And it is an important part of any sort of decision-making, whether it is recognized or not. A recent test noted a phenomenon that may help us make correct decisions. The subjects in the test were given details of a story they were supposed to remember. Actually, the story had not yet been told to them, and in fact, the details they were being asked to remember had not yet been selected. But the ESP-sensitive subjects did remember data of stories not yet told to them, and actually corrected facts that were later proved untrue. Only by using ESP and a sense of precognition specifically could the subjects have known the correct data. Many researchers believe that where ESP is working and observed, the natural course of events is for the subject to make a decision that will be beneficial for him. In fact, ESP is usually a highly beneficial sense. We use extrasensory perception when we wake up on time, although an alarm may not sound. ESP is also at work when we selectively remember or forget to do something, when it becomes clear subsequently that there was an advantage to either remembering or to forgetting. We can all think of instances when forgetting worked to our advantage. There may be periods, however, experienced by almost everyone, when extrasensory perception leads you astray. All of the intuition you've come to rely on leads you to make negative decisions, which in turn promote a feeling of worthlessness and perpetuate a run of bad luck. This is negative ESP at work. Under test conditions, negative ESP is shown when a subject scores less than pure chance would indicate. In a test of precognition, for example, the subject may try to guess 100 numbers to be randomly selected in the future. Chance would indicate 10 correct guesses. The subject who makes 18 or more correct guesses is exhibiting extrasensory perception. The subject who guesses only 3 or less correctly is also showing ESP, but the latter subject is experiencing negative extrasensory perception. Negative ESP shows up when researchers are using the plethysmograph also. It is indicated when a subject is recorded as receiving an impulse when the sender is looking at a blank card and not at names familiar to either the subject or the sender. With the use of the plethysmograph, some things have been learned about negative ESP that had previously puzzled investigators. In fact, a pattern exists in negative ESP which was impossible to chart before the use of physiological testing methods. Indeed, exhaustive testing with the plethysmograph and other measuring devices has shown that even the most gifted psychics have their powers impaired when they are worried, nervous, or for some reason feeling a temporary loss of confidence. The evidence has even been shown using Kirlian photography to view the energy field surrounding each living being. Under stress, the energy field alters drastically, and the magnetic energy emanating from the body is decreased. Tension and fear block ESP receptivity. Thus, one of the fundamental components of psychic ability is confidence and a belief in one's own ability. And the second basic component is the ability to relax. While the discoveries had been often noted informally, the tests firmly established that there is a strong link between the ability to relax and the ability to positively make intuitive decisions. Many expert problem solvers have noted the phenomenon and indicated that when the solution to a problem appears to be elusive or the decision that comes seems for some reason to be false, it is best to stop thinking about the problem, get away from it completely, and try to relax. Various methods to achieve this simple solution exist. The great banker, J.P. Morgan, used to take out a deck of cards and play solitaire for an hour or so. At the end of his card-playing session, he usually found the answer when he was relaxed enough to receive it. Many people who are noted for their ability to solve problems have stated that their most important decisions have been made when they got away from the problem they were trying to solve and were just relaxing. One major industrialist talked about his problem-solving technique. I study all of the sides of the problem, he said, totally immerse myself in the subject. Then, when I'm absolutely sure I have as much information as I need, I get away from the office. I go any place where I can feel relaxed. It may be on the golf course by myself or watching a movie. Then I listen for that little inner voice. It usually comes up with the right answer. The experience of that industrialist is one common to many people who make important decisions on a day-to-day basis. By and large, they all talk about this two-pronged approach. First, you must give the unconscious mind the data it needs to work on a decision. Then you must give it the freedom necessary to arrive at an answer. The old story of Euclid settling into his bathtub and realizing the answer to the problem he had mulled over for months probably had just as much to do with the relaxing warm water as its displacement. Many thinkers before and since have echoed his "Eureka, I have found it," just as a relaxing moment allowed the day's tension to disappear. A well-known trial attorney describes a method he uses with all of his cases and refers to as cerebration. First, I gather all of the facts and mull them over in sequence. What I'm looking for is not what is there, but what isn't, where the flaw exists in the state's case. Once I've thought about perceiving the entire problem, I take a cigar and lie down on the sofa, just watching the smoke curl into the air until the answer comes. Sometimes it doesn't. I've occasionally awakened in the middle of the night with the answer to a problem I've been cerebrating about for weeks. The last time that happened, I got a lot of hell from a co-counsel I had called up and awakened at 5 in the morning. Another time, I had gone over and over photographs of a murder scene. Something bothered me, and I couldn't figure it out. This time it was 3 in the morning when I sat bolt upright in bed. If my client had committed the murder in the way the state charged, there would have been a great deal of blood. There was only a little blood, but the entire image had to come to me in a dream. I couldn't see it while I was looking at the pictures. My client, by the way, was acquitted. Creative thinkers in most fields usually talk about thought processes that are not straight-line thinking, proceeding in a logical manner from point A to points B, C, and D, and so on. Usually the means of arriving at a decision or discovering a solution is a vague process, only hazily perceived. Often the answers to problems appear during a relaxed moment or in a dream. It seems that the creative mind works with greater results on a problem when the conscious mind is in a state of relaxation. And the same is true of extrasensory perception. It seems to function best when there is little in the way of conscious thought or stress to inhibit the signal. This may be the reason why experiments show that telepathy operates in 3 out of 4 people when the receiver is asleep. And when the receiver is awake, telepathy is only effective in 1 case out of 4. This further substantiates the idea that the receiver is the more active partner in ESP experimentation, and that it is the receiver who benefits from relaxation. While learning to relax may not instantly make you receptive to all of the vibrations of extrasensory perception and turn you overnight into that successful good guesser whose decisions will guide a large company to success, relaxation is one of the most important ways to free the unconscious and the brain's extrasensory perceptors so that truly creative thinking can occur. In addition, learning to relax can be an important step toward eliminating those negative ESP times when your intuitive thought processes will turn up the wrong answer. People can often go through this kind of experience for weeks or even months. Wrong choices tend to make a person tense, and so continue to perpetuate more wrong choices in a cycle that may seem never-ending. But learning to relax can be a key to freeing the unconscious from negative ESP and opening the way for positive extrasensory communication. Throughout various series of tests on subjects for ESP, whenever negative ESP began to appear, it was found that some event had occurred to make the subject tense and ill at ease. One student subject who had showed a high degree of ESP potential all of a sudden began to experience negative ESP. In a few days, he was once again scoring high in the tests. A few weeks later, the negative ESP recurred. It was found that negative ESP occurred in every experiment on the day before an engineering examination. Obviously, it was the stress and tension accompanying the taking of the exam that blocked the subject's extrasensory perception. This was further confirmed by a group of plethysmograph tests on this same student on the day before each of 8 different examinations. In all of these experiments, there were negative results. On 2 occasions, testing was done when there were no exams, and both times the tests were positive. The odds against this being a chance result are 500 to 1. In addition to mental anxiety and tension, physiological stress also can induce negative ESP. One man was successfully tested for ESP over a period of 3 weeks. In the 4th week, however, he began to show negative results on the tests. It turned out that this individual had had an accident only a couple of days before the test and was suffering a great deal of pain in his right leg. Tests have shown that any psychological or physiological stress causes negative ESP among subjects
who are normally ESP receptive. But the tests used in these experiments were designed to register reaction in the perception forms of ESP, that is, telepathy, clairvoyance, and precognition. It has been found that stress can influence psychokinesis in a positive way and may even increase the ability to send ESP messages, as for example, during a disaster or personal emergency. A simple headache or exhaustion can affect extrasensory perception. So can pain or emotional pressure, and even environmental conditions or national events. So it seems that under these conditions, making important intuitive decisions should be avoided. But does the stress of making an important decision itself affect extrasensory perception so that intuitive decisions are, by their very nature, hampered by a shutting down of the ESP mechanism? If the decision to be made is so important to your well-being that making the decision creates a great deal of stress, won't you intuitively make the wrong choice? Often very successful people see making money as a game and are not under great psychological stress when a decision is made. So it is possible to psych yourself into a condition where stress will not be the operative factor. It is possible to measure both stress and ESP receptivity that could tell a subject which would be the best time for making intuitive decisions. But the development of personal techniques for avoiding stress, or at least for reducing its effect on the decision-making process, is currently the best solution. While internal stress will affect the decision-making process, external stress, that is, bad vibrations from some friend or associate, can possibly have the same effect. An awareness of the mental state of others is necessary in order to deal with their stress controlling your extrasensory perception. And so there is a great deal that can interfere with extrasensory perception. ESP can be affected by psychological or physiological stress experienced by the subject on the part of those around him or in the immediate environment. A country in a national emergency will create specific stress for the individual and interfere with his capacity to receive ESP. There is stress all around us in these stressful times. Successfully dealing with stress must be one of the important means we have to fully utilize our ESP for making creative decisions. In trying to fully use your extrasensory perception to help make decisions that are intuitive and creative, it is clear that relaxation is important. But just telling yourself to relax is not enough. You need to develop a personal method that you can use to create a relaxed state. During the last number of years, scientists have found that there are methods that we can use to gain conscious control over many of our unconscious processes, creating a controlled state of awareness to the unconscious and extrasensory functions. Methods such as transcendental meditation and biofeedback offer us ways to control our personal environment as never before. Biofeedback has proven itself as an invaluable method for many who need this kind of means to sustain life itself. Some patients afflicted with a heart disease, manifested by irregular heartbeats, have been able to control and regulate this function using biofeedback methods of mental discipline. And experimenters have been able to teach laboratory animals to control their blood pressure using biofeedback. Biofeedback works by initially using instruments to monitor such internal functions as brain waves. When the brain waves are monitored at a frequency such as the alpha level, the instrument generates a particular sound or flash of light. Once a person is aware of the way the alpha state feels, it is possible to learn how to reproduce that state. There are currently thousands of scientists conducting research on biofeedback in this country alone. Some contend that training in biofeedback can help man eliminate one of the greatest causes of disease and illness, tension. Claims are also made that biofeedback can help improve both memory and learning ability. One of the drawbacks to biofeedback is that it involves expensive monitoring equipment that must be manned by trained technicians, therefore limiting its use to relatively small numbers of people. But there is some talk of a mini biofeedback machine small enough to carry in a briefcase, which can be self-operated. Innovations such as this could make biofeedback available to everyone. Right now, a less complicated method of control can be achieved with meditation. Using relatively simple techniques, the person who meditates is able to lower his oxygen metabolism, decrease the body's production of the anxiety-producing substance called blood lactate, and bring down high blood pressure. All of this can be done by using the method of meditation for a few minutes every day. The beneficial physiological responses occur automatically as a side reaction to the mental discipline, and they begin within a few minutes of the meditation period. People suffering from high blood pressure achieve lasting effects throughout the day. Of course, many of the positive effects of meditation cannot be seen or measured, but they have been reported by hundreds of thousands of meditators all over the world. Meditators claim profound relaxation and enhanced feelings of confidence and well-being. They feel energetic, clear-minded, and report an increased ability to concentrate. All necessary requirements for good ESP receptivity. Still another method being used in the United States to relieve tension and fully realize extrasensory potential for creative thinking is found in some courses in relaxation and motivation. Many organizations in the country offer courses in psychic development. While there may be many differing opinions as to method, these courses have the same basic premise, that you can teach a person to relax, and you can teach a person to fully use his unconscious potential. By and large, these courses stress inner awareness and recognition of subconscious forces within oneself. Some of the courses that are concerned with self-development stress the use of auto-suggestion to create an internal state that will bring into play the mind's reserved powers and so bestow on the user of the technique success. Dale Carnegie has taught this sort of technique for many years. The Carnegie formula for success refers to the mind as a station that broadcasts and receives thought waves. The Carnegie course says that by programming your station with the use of positive autosuggestion, you can influence other people who will listen to you and presumably do business with you. Carnegie believed that some other sense would help anyone achieve his goals. One method that he advocated was to imagine yourself in the company of some of the great minds of the past and to use their advice and counsel to stimulate an imaginative solution to a problem. Most relaxation and motivation courses operate on a level that aims to simulate the results of biofeedback. Brainwave activity at the alpha level ordinarily signifies a state of relaxation. This is the state that biofeedback training attempts to create. It is a state of mind that is connected with the improvement of creativity and the development of extrasensory perception. Achieving the alpha state does not guarantee creative or psychic power, but it will help develop a profound relaxation, and this may be the ultimate key to psychic receptivity. We know for a fact that alpha waves are definitely increased during meditation, and meditation is a basic preparation for ESP. The stress component in the lives of most people has become a recognized factor in severe illness and psychological disorders. And to this end, many companies have encouraged relaxation training programs for their stress-laden executives. Their objective is to alleviate strain and tension, but they may be achieving an unexpected side effect by helping develop psychic powers. Xerox and PepsiCo are two top corporations leading the way with research programs in biofeedback and brainwave control. Other major corporations involved in relaxation meditation courses include Dow Chemical, Bell Telephone, and First National City Bank. Many colleges and universities throughout the country also offer courses in relaxation training, and some grade schools are using meditation in place of morning prayers. The results will be a long time in coming in, but to date, several companies have reported that they have been able to reduce employee turnover since they've relieved some of the tension from the office environment. The question arises whether relaxation in itself is enough to increase ESP receptivity. It may be for some people, but there are also specific techniques to use in conjunction with relaxation meditation therapy that will help develop your psychic powers. The reason relaxation is such an important component in psychic development is that it provides access to the subconscious mind. And it is in the subconscious mind that ESP takes place. Fears, tensions, stress are all stumbling blocks to the subconscious. These negative components interfere with telepathic signals and, in essence, cripple the receiver. Even the most renowned psychics will find their powers drastically diminished if they are worried or lack confidence. While we speak of the conscious and the subconscious as two distinct entities, they are actually inseparable, and they exhibit a profound effect on each other. The unconscious or subconscious mind believes whatever the conscious mind tells it, and it will act out whatever thought is put into it. Thus, if you consciously bombard yourself with fear and anxiety, your subconscious will act accordingly, responding in physical and emotional illnesses. This phenomenon has been proved time and time again, and once we have recognized this interaction within ourselves, it is easy to see how the thoughts of each individual can affect the world around him. There are 3 specific techniques that will aid in developing your psychic powers, and each of them is rooted in positive input to the subconscious mind. First, you must form a mental image of your objective. Whatever the problem, visualize yourself solving it. Secondly, you must accept willingly the fact that a solution resides within you. You must believe wholeheartedly in the result. And finally, you must expect the solution to come to you. You do not have to demand the answer or anticipate. Simply know that your subconscious mind will function because you have made adequate preparation. It is fundamentally a question and answer process. You actively ask the question and passively listen for the answer. That is why meditation has been such an asset problem solving. It creates a passive state in which the quiet resources of the mind can be heard. You can develop your capacity for creative decision-making using your inherent power of extrasensory perception by concentrating on these 3 values. First, you must believe that ESP is a reality and that it is available to you as a channel of communication. Second, you should try to discipline your mind. When you seek a solution to a problem, try to eliminate outside distractions that keep you from focusing. And finally, once you have done your homework, relax both your mind and body and listen quietly for the answer. Believe, focus, relax. These steps to developing ESP allow you to think creatively in a manner that far surpasses the logical step-by-step method. A computer can think logically much more efficiently than a human being ever will. But a computer can never leave its rigid step process, which is the very purpose of its existence. But you can. As one thinker put it, a computer can dig a deeper and bigger hole. But if that hole is in the wrong place, no matter how deep it is and no matter how neatly dug it is, it will still be in the wrong place. It takes someone with imagination to stop digging in one place and start all over again somewhere else. But most people trying to think like computers will go right on digging the same hole in the same place until they are in a rut so high that they can't see over the edge. And it becomes easier just to stay down there. The really extraordinary thinkers of all ages have been people who did not think in logical step-by-step process. They are people whose minds were so creative that they could leap from subject to subject, from one expertise to another without skipping a beat. Gillette, the man who invented the safety razor, was a traveling salesman. A bookkeeper named Eastman took the world of photography by storm. And a violin player invented Kodachrome. The list of inventors who had little special knowledge is endless, but they all had creative minds. One important executive head of the advertising division of a major pharmaceutical company says that he always hires people inexperienced in promotion. That way, he says, they don't know what can't be done, so they go ahead and do it. We have said that the best way of helping open ESP channels is to relax mentally and physically. Some people have also found that sleeping is a direct connection with their telepathic powers. Solutions to problems that have worried them for days will suddenly wake them up in the middle of the night or will come to them in a dream. Writers have reported that they sometimes dream the plot to a book they are working on. Scientists and mathematicians have often observed that solutions to difficult problems come to them in dreams. These kind of solutions only seem to come after the individual has put in a great deal of work on the problem, in the same way as other ESP problem solving occurs. The dream seems to pick up all the threads of the problem and sort them out in a manner that allows the solution to come through. William Blatty, the author of The Exorcist, had reason to credit an ESP dream with saving him a great deal of money. Blatty had been losing heavily in the stock market, which had been causing him considerable thought and concern. One night he had a dream where he was in a hotel, and the desk clerk gave him a room key marked number 130. The next morning, the author searched for a stock selling at $130 and bought it. The stock climbed, and Blatty recouped his earlier losses. Some people say they never dream, but this is entirely false. Everybody dreams, but some people remember their dreams better than others. You can learn to remember your dreams and remember them accurately with a little bit of training. Dreams often appear full of symbolism and in an apparently erratic fashion, but that is because you only remember pieces of the dreams, and they get all jumbled up and run together when you try to remember them the next day. As you begin to practice remembering your dreams, your recall will improve. Keep a pad and pencil by your bedside. If you wake up after a dream, write it down. Then go back to sleep. You can program yourself to wake up at regular intervals during the night. Note your dreams on the pad and go back to sleep. The more you do this, the more sense your dreams will begin to make. And the more dreams you remember, the more you will be able to remember. Dream recall is definitely a process that can be developed. After a while, you will remember all of your dreams. And when you do, they will sort themselves out into much more meaningful pictures. So keep your pad and pencil handy and program yourself before you go to sleep to wake up after your dreams. Tell yourself that you will remember, that you want to remember, and that your dreams will make sense and that you will understand them. When you begin practicing the development of your ESP capacity, start small. Don't begin with a major decision that will cost you your bank balance or change your job or drastically alter your life. Take it one step at a time. Choose problems that are interesting but not threatening in any way. Which block should you turn down to find a parking place? It sounds a little ridiculous, but it will help you get the feeling of how your ESP is working. Test yourself, open up your mind, and have the courage to ride on your intuition. Courage is the final and perhaps most important factor in creative, positive ESP. You can't win if you aren't willing to take a chance. You must be willing to go ahead when others hesitate. If you seem to have ESP missing, or a negative ESP, then take that into consideration and go right when your intuition says left. The more you are aware of your ESP power working, and the more familiar you become with how you feel when you guess right, the easier it will be to solve problems. Remember that you must do your homework. Get the facts. Understand what the situation is that you want to solve. Get involved completely. Then, relax physically and mentally and listen for the answer.